Everybody, this is Theresa with Garrity Tools, and I'm going to show you how to use the mushroom anvils to make your own dishes and bowl shapes. Kentucky Mudworks White Lightning porcelain, but you can really use any clay body from stoneware to terracotta. This works for any clay. And along the way, I'm going to show you some tips for how to get nice smooth edges and the best bowl shape that you can. So to start, we're going to wedge our clay and get as many air bubbles as we can out of it. When you roll out your clay, you want it to be between an 1/8 inch and a 1/4 inch thick. I like to go on the thinner side. Some people like it thicker. I like to roll from both sides of the clay so that I'm kind of pressing it into itself and working out any air bubbles that might be in there. And it makes it more strong and less prone to cracking. Before I go to cut out my bowls, I like to use either a wooden or metal rib to work out any air bubbles and compress the clay a little bit further. By doing this, I apply pressure, about a medium amount of pressure. Sometimes you might want a little bit of water on here to help your tool glide across. And this just serves to compress the clay into itself even more. I like to have lots of texture in my pieces, so I'm going to give you some ideas for things that you can use that might be lying around the house to get some really interesting texture. First and most obvious is using things like lace that you might have lying around. These are pretty good. I really enjoy using things like leaves from houseplants. And you can also use stuff that you might not normally think of, like here's a bracelet I got from an artist where I work. Press that in, get some interesting textures. See what happens. Ooh, that's pretty cool. And last but not least, my very favorite, is to use a doily. These give you really great texture, and depending on the thickness of them, you can get really deep impressions. I want to use enough pressure to where the clay is just going to become level with the surface of the fiber I've added on top, or whatever I've added. So I'm kind of applying medium pressure, I'm not applying too much. If you press too hard, it'll kind of squeeze up through your fabric layers. All right, very nice. Some tips for cutting out your bowls. If you don't have a nice variety of cookie cutters, there are household things that you can use to trace your bowls out. My personal favorite, things like lids, are really great. And you want your surface that you cut to be at least a 1/2 inch wider than your piece. So this mushroom tool is 3 inches wide. I want to find a circle that's at least 4 inches. Let's see, I think I've got one here. That is perfect. And if you're going to do a tracing, let's do this one with a tracing. If you're going to do a tracing, you can simply take your needle tool and cut out around that circular object to get your piece. Another way that you can do it, if you are lucky enough to have some really great cookie cutters, is to use some saran wrap over your surface without any wrinkles in it. So I kind of smooth those out. The right size for my 3 inch. And I want to press all the way into the table. And you can see I'm left with a nice round edge. Let's move up to our 4 inch anvil. Again, I want there to be space around the edge, about 5 inches. And whatever clay you don't get For your bowls, the excess, you can re-wedge that and keep making more. Big one. Now for your larger anvils, we have 6 through 10-inch anvils. Sometimes it can be hard to find a cookie cutter that big. We were lucky to find these adjustable cake pans that you can shift the size of them if you don't have clay embedded in them and get exactly the size that you need. Make sure you get all the way down to the table with your cut. There we have it. Again, this excess clay is still very usable, still very malleable. Just wedge it back up and make more slabs as you go. So now we need to make sure that our clay isn't so floppy that whenever we go to make our impression with the anvil, that it's not going to just slump right back into a slab. We want these to be about pre-leather hard, so not fully formed and stiff, but enough to where they're not quite so malleable. So I use a hairdryer. So as you can see, these pieces, they're still malleable, but they're a lot less floppy. So again, pre-leather hard, not fully leather hard. So let's start with our 3-inch anvil. You can see that it's 3 inches wide, but again, we cut a 4-inch piece. And let's use our one with a little more texture so you can see how it retains that integrity of the texture. So your piece of slab clay on the foam, put your saran wrap over it, and this prevents it from sticking to it so you don't have to peel it off and adjust the form. I like to look straight down at it and see that there's an even amount of clay hanging out on all the sides of the perimeter of my mushroom anvil. And then using my body weight, not just my wrist, I like to push down and kind of give it a rocking motion so it really hugs the sides of your piece. You can peel away your saran wrap, and because it's dry enough, it's able to hold its shape really beautifully. So let's do our larger one. Let's see if we got it dry enough. Again, lay it down. This one takes a little bit more pressure. So I like to try to put my whole body into it. There it is. It was dry enough. Thank you from Garrity Tools, and we'll see you next time.